I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, January 28th, 2019, and the time is 7 o'clock p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were a few items in the table file.
Yes, there were just a couple of items, including the presentation for this evening's FFA, alumni school presentation, and then in addition there was a grant application.
Okay, excellent. We'll, if there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay, I see someone come forward, so I would like to review the guidelines of our public comment. I'd like to remind the public that this is a listening opportunity for the board and not a time to debate an issue. Also, the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act prohibits comments about specific student matters, even without naming the student in open session. This includes the public comment portion of our meeting. The board respects and values input on student matters, but when it relates to a specific student or to a specific student matter, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. So we welcome you to make your comments. We ask that you step to the podium, identify yourself by stating your name and address, and if you represent a group, and we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. So welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Marva de Cantos. I live in 6 Fairway Drive here in Northfield, and I'm the chair of the Human Rights Commission.
Hello, I'm Larry Fowler. I'm from Dundas, and I live in 105 First Street, Dundas. Good to see you guys.
So we're here as Human Rights Commission just to give you an update on what we've been talking about within the Human Rights Commission, and this is about the climate at the schools and how the students feel here. And it connects with the wider issue in our society these days of hate speech increasing everywhere. And this is also happening here in our community. So we've been having conversations with Superintendent Hillman for a long time now and trying to find what are the ways to address these things from the school setting, from the Human Rights Commission, from the community at large. So if you would like, we can come back and another time you put us in your agenda and we can give you an overview of what we've been doing, the conversation we've been having. And one of the things that is happening this year as well, in conjunction with the Human Rights Commission, Northfield Reads has launched their program this year around this book here, A Good Time for the Truth, and it's about race in Minnesota. So they've been exploring through different gatherings what is happening, and many people of color here in the community don't feel welcome in this community, which might come as a surprise for so many people because we prize ourselves as a very welcoming, open community, but for so many people it's not actually that their experience here. And if you want to add anything?
Sure. Good to see you, Superintendent, Mr. Superintendent, and Madam Chair, and Board. I'm here because I'm on the Northfield Reads. This is one of the reasons why I'm here. We selected the book, and we have had 4 or 5 sessions so far, and we have around 100 people come to those sessions to discuss what it's like to live in this city. If you're a person of color or a person of world majority. We chose to use that term. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. 2 years ago, we had a student on our Human Rights Commission who was telling us about an outrageous utterance here at the high school in his classroom. And I said, why don't you do something about it? He said, what? I said, why don't you make a play or something and then go around the community and let the kids hear about it? And he did. There were four in the play, and they had the play, or what you call it, a presentation at the high school with teachers, at a couple churches. We didn't get to Rotary, and we should have, but we just couldn't get our act together enough. You know, kids are really busy these days, but whatever. We talked to the administration, the district. I think that the presentation was something that was helpful. And I think administrators said the same thing. Matt, did you think it was helpful?
Yeah, it was very well done.
Yeah, they did a good job. They did a really good job. Did anybody else hear it? Well, I would like to do it again, but the Human Rights Commission would need to agree with that, and that we meet on the 14th of this next month, of March, right?
No, February.
Of February, yeah, we meet on Halloween. We meet on Valentine's Day. In fact, one of our young students on the commission, we were talking about, shall we have it on Valentine's Day? And she said, I don't have anything else to do on Valentine's Day, so we're meeting on Valentine's Day. We could have a dance if you'd like to come, but whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that we might do what we did 2 years ago with your permission and with the permission of the Human Rights Commission.
So again, if you want to have us come, just do a short presentation about our effort. Just ask whenever you can and have room in your agenda. I know you're always busy, very busy. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, we have several this evening. We're going to start off here with Northfield Middle School. Had 3 Veterans of Foreign Wars Patriots Pen Contest winners. 6th graders Allison Matthews, she won first prize, Lola McCarty, and Ella Pagel. Each wrote a short essay on the subject, Why I Honor the American Flag. And on January 9th, these students accepted their awards and read their essays, and we want to congratulate them on their excellent work. We also had 3 Northfield High School students who competed in the VFW Voice of Democracy essay and speech competition. The topic was Why My Vote Matters. And sophomore Meadow Vertis placed 3rd, junior Grace Muth placed 2nd, and sophomore Annie Frank won first place not only here in Northfield, but also first place in the 1st District, which encompasses 28 communities in southeastern Minnesota. Annie has earned the right to compete in Minneapolis at the state VFW Voice of Democracy competition. If you remember in the past, Logan Ledman just recently had actually competed at the national level in that. So really strong commitment there here in Northfield. We also want to congratulate a number of students with the Northfield High School DECA. Again, no surprise to us to hear their great accomplishments. They had a competition on January 11th, district level competition. 25 students qualified for DECA State. It's held in March. Many qualifying in more than one event, receiving first, second, or third places. And we have a special congratulations to the follow students who qualified in 3 events. I'm not sure if this is the DECA trifecta, but that's what I'm going to choose to call it this evening. Irvin Corona took first and second place in all 3 events. Allison Goodall, first and second place in all 3 events. Maxwell Gordon Mercer, same. Darcy Kornkoven was first place in all 3 events, and Jason Whitehala also placed first in all 3 events. And then a number of other qualifiers, including Alex Broniak, Greta Foster, Mikhail Geisler, Luke Johnson, Wes Ledeen, Grace McDonald, Teague Nelson, Claire Nielsen, Grace Nuger, Angelo Perez, Sydney Peterson, Faith Quick, Brian Rodriguez, Grant Roney, Reed Roney, Ella Schmidt, Will Sherman, Andre Simonet, Gracie Savine, and Jenna Whitehala. So again, our DECA program is kind of a juggernaut there with a number of students qualifying for state. Also, you may have noticed, but we don't have really great weather. And it's really kind of unprecedented. I had a long conversation this afternoon with my friend and yours, Dr. Chris Richardson, someone who knows the position we were in, and we just don't remember a time where we've had 3 days in a row that were canceled, but that's where we're at. Today, it was just the mix of snow and wind overnight. We had a little bit less snow than was anticipated, but it was enough with the drifting to really have a problem for transportation this morning. And then we watched the National Weather Service webinar, and I really want to compliment the National Weather Service. Over the past few years, the service that they've been providing to school districts has really increased. So regularly they're scheduling webinars where decision makers about weather can come and they can learn about what the latest predictions are. They answer questions. They're very, very helpful. And they were affected. They were essential employees who were not paid during the federal shutdown but continued their work. And so we want to thank the National Weather Service employees who have really given us great service despite not being paid. And so we're thankful that that shutdown is over. But really there's just no choice with the next 2 days. Tomorrow we're going to start off relatively balmy in the low negative 30s. But by the time we hit 1 o'clock, we're going to be hitting negative 40. Wind chill warning going into effect at about 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And then if the bottom can drop out on negative 40, I never thought I would say that, but it could. So the silver lining is that we're going to get to pilot our first flexible learning day on Thursday, or excuse me, on Wednesday, pardon me. Hopefully not Thursday, but we don't know quite yet. So what we had said is that if we had 2 full days canceled, due to winter weather, and to be clear, we did not count the September tornado cleanup day toward that total. If we got to the 3rd full day for cancellation, we would pilot a flexible learning day. So last week, coordinating with the end of the first semester, we sent parents information about the flexible learning day pilot. And what is basically the case is we're trying to continue learning to the best of our ability during cancellations due to winter weather. So everyone received this in their email. It's just a single sheet of paper explaining the why, and then it also provides the explanation of the services that are provided that day. So teachers, administrators, and other licensed personnel are available by email or via Schoology or Seesaw from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and then again from 12 to 3. We've given links to people to the staff directory so that people can connect via email when we use this day on Wednesday. For elementary students working with teachers across the district, we started with 1 teacher at each grade level and then had the entire grade level across the district take a look at something we call the Flexible Learning Day Activity Matrix. And students have 4 areas in which they're expected to work in: reading and writing, mathematics and science, social emotional learning, and then a creative segment. And there are at least 4 options in each of those columns. They pick 2 from reading and writing and 1 from the others. If you're in 5th grade, there's 2 reading and writing, 2 math and science, and then 1 from each of the others. And so there's activities that they have a chance to do in place of having to have a makeup day later in June. At the secondary level, secondary teachers will post their activities for the day by 9 a.m. on Schoology. We have asked that they try to limit their activity to about a 20-minute activity, and the reason is the other schools who have gone before us on this, what happens, they said, is that people really underestimate the amount of time it's going to take students to complete an activity. And so their suggestion was ask people to shoot for about 20 minutes. There's going to be some students who take longer, some students who take a lesser amount of time. And so this is a pilot, which means there are going to be some things that are going to go really well. It also means there's going to be some things to improve, and we will be sending out stakeholder surveys to staff, to students through Schoology, and then to teaching staff about what went well and what didn't, and improve it. We have the ability to do this. We know that we can make this work well. We're going to take this first opportunity to pilot it and then learn from there and move forward. We join a growing number of districts who are using this strategy, and we believe that it's going to be successful. So I want to share with you, already today, I had a kindergarten teacher from Greenville Park forward me a message from a kindergarten parent. And the kindergarten parent said, I know today wasn't a flexible learning day, but my daughter wanted to play school, so we used the flexible learning day matrix. And she submitted the things some of the things we asked, take a picture of this after you've completed it. So we know that people have read it and are already actively doing it. So we know that that's a great story. We know that a lot of people are going to have that kind of success. We know some other people may not have that same level of success, and we need to learn from all of it. So just during the announcements this evening, I wanted to share with you that we do get to try our flexible learning day. We're excited about that. It's a pilot. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to move forward. So just wanted to share that as part of the announcements this evening.
That's excellent. Board members' questions. Ellen?
So I have a high school student at home, and one of her questions was they started their new semester and they didn't start it because it was this week. And so these are brand new classes. So how does that work to have a flexible learning day with a 20-minute activity for a class that you haven't met the teacher yet?
So that's going to be a piece where we're going to need some judgment calls on it. It could be that the teacher's activity might be write an introduction for me of yourself. That could be the activity. Now, we also need to remember that most of the classes that our high school students take are year-long courses, so there will be some of those kinds of issues, and there's a few other hurdles that will come up that we didn't feel were enough to prevent us from starting. So there may be some circumstances where there might be a class like that where there isn't an activity for that day, and that's okay. I mean, we're going to need, we trust our teachers with these children every day. We can trust them to create the activity that we think that they would want to do or need to do that day. So that's there's some other things that we're thinking about. How would it work with this? And that's just one example. So I appreciate you bringing that up. The other piece I just want to make clear too is that this document was sent out in Spanish. And then all of the flexible learning day activity matrices for the elementary were also translated into Spanish. So they are available in both languages. Good
Excellent.
question.
Other
Thank you.
questions, comments? Jeff?
You mentioned weather briefly. I wonder if you could just explain briefly on what is blatant cold and then really what, as far as cancellation goes.
So we have used over time, we've settled on using the National Weather Service. They have a wind chill chart that basically shows the length of time it takes for someone with uncovered skin to have frostbite. And once we get into that 10-minute range, which frankly is right around -40, that is where we start to close, or we think about closing. Now tomorrow it's not going to be quite into that range at the beginning of school, but it's going to get to that point by midday. And so frankly, some of it is a judgment call, in terms of the amount of time during the day. And when we have a wind chill warning, we have a wind chill warning that goes into effect at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. One of my fears is if we had tried to bring students in, we had thought about, do we tell parents tonight that we're going to come in the morning, but do a 2-hour early dismissal? That's something several school districts talked about. However, the issue is the worst case scenario there is if the wind chill warning were extended or created to be earlier than 3 o'clock. We also have to remember that the wind chill today, remember if it was converted, tomorrow's wind chills would be much colder under the old wind chill method. And I'm looking at board member Tom Baraniak, who runs the Carlton Weather Station, who still has the old wind chill on. So some of it is, a lot of it is around if we hit that point of where we're 10 minutes or less, and some of it is a judgment call. And we check in with the weather service, we talk with a number of other school districts to make that decision. And what the key thing is that tomorrow, once the bottom drops out, it's going to drop. We're looking at -58 at 6 a.m. on Wednesday morning. No reasonable person thinks that we can really be here. That is just not safe. And it's bordering on safety. You can be out for 10 or 15 minutes with uncovered skin for most of tomorrow. Most of our kids are fortunate enough to have warm winter clothes, but not all do. And so we want to make sure, in fact, some of our high school students who have warm winter clothes don't always wear them. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to make sure that students are safe, Jeff.
Okay, other comments around flexible learning day or the decision around school closing? Certainly not a science, that is for sure. Amy?
I just want to thank you for making the decisions early, because I think it's really helpful for families to have the time to plan instead of waking up to find out that there's no school. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And what I will tell you is, if I can just briefly share on that,
Absolutely.
is that the trend has been, it used to be no one would ever make a call until 5 a.m. that morning. What we've seen the trend in, as we've discussed as superintendents over the last few years, is exactly that. Parents are rightfully asking to be able to plan a little bit better for the next morning. You've seen a number of schools over the last few years where they're making decisions the night before. Now, what I will tell you, the struggle of making the decision the night before is you're making it based upon a prediction. And whenever we make it based upon a prediction, there are going to be times where we swing and miss, and where there isn't a flake on the ground, and everyone's going to call us dumb, and you don't know what you're doing. Well, there's both sides, right? If we give that ability to plan for the next morning, there are going to be times we're going to miss, and I'm frankly comfortable with that. So the weather service is giving us better and better data all the time, but it is a prediction when we do it the night before. We prefer to try to make it in the morning, but we know that really creates a lot of heartache for parents trying to figure out daycare for the day. And so it's a piece where I think you're going to see more and more where people will make the decision the night before, and we can think about yesteryear and wish that there's some people who think we never closed school. We all know differently, right? So we make the best decisions with the information that we can at the time. We try to err towards safety. There are times we get it wrong both ways. Fortunately, we have been on the right side more often than not.
Excellent.
No.
How is that communicated?
Well, that's a great question, because we now communicate over 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10. So people have the opportunity to hear the message in over 12 different ways. 4 television stations, 2 radio stations, a phone call that they get from Skylar, an email that they get from Skylar. If they sign up for a text message from Skylar, It's on our website, it's on our Facebook page, it's on our Twitter feed, and just this afternoon, I'm getting old because I learned Instagram this afternoon so we could post it on Instagram. So I think if people don't, and then we also change our voicemail on the district line. So lots of ways for people to get the information out.
Excellent. This was good timing to be able to talk about it this evening. And I think one thing that we clearly heard is this is never an easy decision. And I appreciate the way you really do take a thoughtful and very pragmatic approach to making that decision. But it weighs heavily, I know. And it was occupied a great portion of your day trying to decide what the right thing to do was.
I had twice the hair last week. Just kidding.
Okay.
It's been a while.
That's the jokes, folks.
That's right.
As you say, right? Okay.
Thanks for letting me
excellent.
share that during announcements this evening.
No, it's great. It's really good stuff. Okay, so we are excited to present the Randolph FFA Alumni chapter this evening. Just as a reminder to board members, their presentation was in your board table file this evening. We welcome John Peterson, Derek Eastrom, and Tasha Evans. All happen to be Northfield High School alumni, so welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Can everybody hear us okay? Do we need to talk into the microphone or do it this way?
It's good if you use the microphone because then the camera
Okay.
records it better.
Well, as Julie said, I'm John Peterson. I'm the current alumni board president, 2012 Northfield High School graduate.
Derek Eastrom, the Alumni Board Assistant Treasurer, Northfield Alumni Graduate of 2008.
And Tasha Evans, I'm the board secretary, and I graduated Northfield in 2010.
Couple other introductions, Ed Terry, guy in the tie. He's our ag education teacher in Randolph. Pretty astonishing. He is in his 42nd year of teaching at Randolph. And then there are also some students who we will introduce later in the presentation. So I guess to start, for those of you that don't know, it's definitely a pretty unique situation that we have between the Northfield School District and the Randolph School District. So all three of us were full-time Northfield students that had the opportunity to attend Randolph for the first hour and a half of our day, to attend ag education, and then Ed, what would you call your second hour class? That's not really all ag stuff.
Well, it's forestry and conservation. It has a lot to do with the environment and
Yep.
agriculture.
So the relationship started in 1994 with one student that attended class in Randolph. It averages between 12 and 15 students a year. This year there are currently 19 students, which make up about 25% of the students that Ed sees on a daily basis. And then Ed can talk about his curriculum a little later on in the presentation.
So once a month, Ed hosts his outreach aid class for his freshmen and sophomores from Northfield who aren't eligible for a day as class, as well as his juniors and seniors that can't fit it into a class's schedule. So there's also students here from Northfield as freshmen and sophomores that can take his classes as from other school districts. There's other school districts that participate are New Prague, Northfield, Rosemont, Hastings, Lakeville, and Randolph. And then it formerly included Jordan, Faribault, Cottage Grove, and other homeschooled students. The program allows students to stay involved in the chapter and learn about agriculture, as well as meet and interact with other students. And those meetings are once a year, I believe. Once a month.
Once the school year starts. There's no meeting times in the summer besides events. These are some pictures. I think this year is the first year they actually did it. Chapter meeting, school year kickoff. So there's a lot of day kids that ended up serving the picnic style supper they had, and then they got to interact with the outreach kids that they usually don't see except for at events. So, so as the alumni, I guess our main role is to assist Ed in the chapter with any events they need extra chaperones at. We give a lot of support through scholarships and leadership grants. The leadership grants basically helps offset the cost for students to go to different leadership activities around the state. I I know all of us have been to our big national convention, which is held in the fall of every year. Our annual meeting in March and where we have our toy auction. And then we also have a tractor pull in the summer. In between those two events, we raise money for the leadership grants and scholarships. Both events are open to the public. You do not have to be an alumni member to come and bid at our toy auction, and that's usually a pretty good time, and we have really good community support at that. So on the right is a table that was donated 2 years ago by an alumni member. Pretty awesome craftsmanship in this, and this is actually auctioned off, and then in turn we donated it to Ed for all his years of service to the chapter. And then the bottom photo is just a picture from our tractor pull in the summer. Okay.
So the Tracy legacy, this is something that started this last year. He was a Northfield graduate in 1960 and then an active Northfield FFA member. He passed away in 2014 and donated a 360-acre farm just outside of Denison to the Minnesota FFA Foundation. And the Randolph FFA received 40 acres of that farm so that they can plant corn and soybeans, and then they also harvest it and manage that. So it's a good learning opportunity for the students. And then the remainder of the farm will be sold and the proceeds go to the state foundation. And those funds will also be used for scholarships.
So a little more information, I guess, on this slide. It is a very unique opportunity. Obviously, 40 acres of land is pretty expensive, so for the kids to have that opportunity to basically get some hands-on learning, I farm full-time, and it's definitely a learning experience just to figure out how much money is spent and different decisions that you make, how that affects you on your return on investment, basically. And then, obviously, the Minnesota Foundation plans to liquidate their portion of it, but that all the money will be used for scholarships, but that is statewide, that's not just local, so that affects all the students around the state. Some of our chapter events, I guess, and I don't know if the kids want to come up and talk about some of the events they do. Every year for Ag Week, we take a tour. We've been to John Deere and Waterloo to the tractor factory. We've been to Jackson, Minnesota, where they build another brand of tractors. Something ag-related, go to the factory and get tours and just learn more about different industries. We have our Farmer Appreciation Breakfast, which is in March. Our tractor parade in April, and then they do, I think it's 4 different parades: Jesse James, Cannon Falls, Hastings, Denison. Am I missing any, Ed? So the students build a float every year. They pick a different theme, and it's just basically to raise awareness about agriculture and the things that they get to do in FFA. We have a children's barnyard that the students work, alumni assists at both the Rice and Dakota County fairs, and that's all just educating the public, lots of hands-on activities that kids can do. Corn Drive for Camp Courage is a big one that's held every fall, and students go out to the community, to farmers, and farmers can either donate corn or soybeans, and all that is in turn sold and donated to Camp Courage, which is a summer camp for disabled kids. Over the last 15 to 20 years, Randolph alone has raised over $300,000 that has been donated to that organization, which is pretty incredible. Just shows the type of community support that we have behind us. And then our fruit sales, which is the chapter's their own big fundraiser for the year, and that is usually the first part of November. Fruit comes in right before Christmas. So
For all those chapter events, the alumni comes in and helps Ed where chaperones are needed, where extra adult supervision is needed as far as, just checks and balances. With the fruit sales, the chapter sold a semi-and-a-half of fruit, right? About? Yep. And so all of that needs to be counted, inventoried when it's unloaded, and then as it goes out of the school to get delivered, and then when the kids sold the fruit, going through all of those fruit slips to make sure that the inventory was going to be right when we get the semi and a half of fruit in. So, yeah.
So on the top right is a picture of, I think, this past year's float, kids at one of the parades. The lower left is the students planning their actual plot. So this is a parcel of land that one of the co-ops donates them to basically do a plot on. It rotates back and forth between corn and soybeans, and the kids between themselves get to figure out what they want to test that year, if it's plant population or tillage types or whatever they want to try. Ed lets them do it. And then Ed will touch a little bit more. The last couple of years the chapter's been participating in Urban Ag Day, which is held at the state fair. And is that in August, Ed?
No, it's actually during May, during school.
Okay. So basically, students from the Twin Cities that have basically, most of them have never been on a farm, basically gives them a day where students from 3 chapters, Randolph, they go up and they basically man booths and run different stuff. It's similar to our children's barnyard, but it's a lot bigger, way more students. Had really good luck with that the last 2 years and really good response and feedback from the students that have been able to attend. So.
So National Convention, one of the most exciting things that the students like to do. 65,000 FFA members from all over the nation go to this convention. This last year it was in Indianapolis again, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So they got to travel down there. 15 to 20 of those students are from the Randolph chapter. There were 2 from Northfield this year. And then over the last 20 years, Ed has taken 60 students from Northfield to National Convention. So it's hosted in Louisville or Indianapolis. You get to walk around booths and talk to exhibitors and things like that. This year, President Trump showed up and gave a speech. And then Ed has had approximately 50 students receive the American degree at the National Convention, which is one of the organization's highest awards. Less than 1% of 65,000 FFA members receive their American degrees.
I am one of those American degree recipients.
So is he.
I've also received mine, so
I was not.
it is quite the process.
But I did go.
Lots of paperwork. You basically have to have financial records of some type of supervised agricultural experience. So for me, it was working on my family's farm, putting in hours, doing different tasks, things I learned, as well as that graduated into doing stuff on my own. Investing money, renting land, and all that goes towards that. And it was quite an experience to get on stage in front of 65,000 other members and receive that award. So, and these are some pictures. So this bottom left, this is at the career fair. There are over 1,300 exhibitors, and they're there just to talk to students who are going to be future professionals in the ag industry, I guess. And then the top right that's when it is in Indianapolis. That's where all the national FFA stuff is based. So it's pretty incredible just to see all the different stuff, and it is literally a sea of blue jackets. And that's all you see going through Skyways and walking through the event center and all that stuff. And then these other 2 pictures are just from different addresses, like when the national officers get up and give their addresses and different awards programs and stuff like that. So, and then from there, I guess we'll talk a little bit about our classroom experience with Ed. And if you guys want to come up here, you can fill in whatever we miss, I guess. But I was in it for 2 years, so I basically started my freshman year of high school. I did 2 years of the outreach program, and then my junior and senior year, I was actively involved in the day class. Really nice experience, and I would compare it looking back. It's kind of not really an introduction to college, but it kind of gives you a college experience because you're interacting with kids from another school district as well as other events. I mean, you're interacting with a lot of people from different backgrounds, and obviously Randolph is a much different type of school setting just because I think the year I graduated with 270 students and they had a graduating class of 32. So it's just a whole different experience, I guess.
My classroom experience was a lot of fun. I did not grow up in an agriculture-based housing. I had family members that had farms, which sparked my interest. So it was kind of nice to have that interest and then be able to build and expand on it. I now work on a dairy farm. I've worked there for 6 years, and I went to college for agribusiness, and I do a lot. Now I also work in a vet clinic, and that expanded my knowledge on large animal, and so I work in a large and small animal practice, and it's kind of nice that having that program with the school helped me figure out what I wanted to do with my future. So expanding knowledge too.
And then my classroom experience, the 2 years that I went my junior and senior year here at Northfield High School, I think there were 12 of us that commuted to and from. Maybe half of those did have a farming background and the other half not so much. But looking at the agriculture industry, I think 33% at least in the United States is made up of agriculture. Vet clinics and just where all the food from grocery stores come from, keeping in touch with those friends that I went to FFA with. A lot are working for other companies in marketing and marketing food products. Breeding and doing studies with tomato plants and horticulture and other just typical common foods that you find in the grocery store. My supervised agriculture experience was in equine science. I managed a horse ranch. I started working there in middle school and then managed it in high school, filling morning and afternoon shifts so people could go work there. And then also being in charge of building maintenance and just yard maintenance, so my bosses could focus in on training horses. And then I stayed in FFA and an active member after that, and I know John was too, because we have to get our American degree, because after our senior year of getting our state degree and being recognized with the state of Minnesota FFA, then we continue going to other schools and doing other interviews, more paperwork with records, and showing them, and then eventually making it to an American degree recipient that we usually get when we're around 20 or 21 years old.
So this is my second year in FFA.
If you could introduce yourself,
sorry.
that would be great. We'd like to know who you are.
I'm Jake Volek, and I'm a senior at Northfield, and this is my second year in FFA. And the reason I really joined was because I didn't have any agriculture experience, so I wanted to know what it was like to work on a farm and all that. But the past couple of years, it's been more of a leadership experience, because I've never really had that before. I never was in any sports or anything like that, so getting to choose decisions on our plot and all that was really what made it fun for me. And I'm the treasurer this year, so I get to make a lot of decisions about what our money is spent on and all of that, along with all the other students.
I'm Brady Billmeyer. I'm a senior here this year at Northfield High School, and this is my first year. And it's so much more than just agriculture. You get to learn just about leadership and how to really grow as a person. And that's all I got.
My name is Jaden Miller. I'm a junior at Northfield High School, and it is my first year in FFA. I have learned a whole new world, pretty much. I grew up on a hobby farm, so I didn't have as much experience, but it always I was interested in it, and I wanted to learn more, so I started working at Syngenta when I was old enough to, and my brother kind of led me in the direction of being in the FFA class, and so I started this year, and it has been really fun and enjoyable, getting to meet a lot more students, and feeling more comfortable around other people.
And I'm the old dog of the crew. I started teaching in 1968, if you can figure that far back. So that's my 48th year, and I love what I do. That's why I keep doing it, and you can see that I have a good reason to want to keep teaching with the awesome people that I have, and I really want to thank Northfield for their cooperation in this process since 1994, when we started with one student and have grown, and if I were to ask my kids how to spell FFA, which used to stand for Future Farmers of America, no longer does, stands for FFA, and it's spelled opportunities, because that's what these kids get. It's all kinds of opportunities. John, when he was the first year out of high school, and you can stay in basically until 4 years after high school in FFA, he was the state star in agricultural placement. We've had Will Bolam, who graduated 5 or 6 years ago, was on a judging team that won the state for general livestock and moved on to national. Last year, Nicole Kozalik, as a sophomore, won the state public speaking contest against all seniors from the other regions in the state, and this past fall went on to compete at the national level. This year I'll have 4 kids applying for their state degrees. I should have about another 4 or 5 going for their American degree, and it's pretty awesome, you know. 3,000 kids, 3,500 maybe out of 650,000 get their American degrees, and you got 2 of them standing right here. And a lot of my American degrees have come from Northfield, and sometimes I probably toot my own horn a little too much, but 2006, Randolph was recognized as the outstanding agriculture department in the state of Minnesota, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we do have Northfield students and the cooperation that we have, because they have added a lot to our chapter. I also do occasionally teach in Northfield too. I speak a couple times a year to the Global Studies class, and back in between my early teaching career in Farmington and going to Randolph, I did some long-term subbing here for the ag department here. And of course, you know, I had 2 great ag teachers when I was in Northfield, and I grew up on a farm, and that's the farm we're on today. It's been in our family since 1871. But my dad wasn't ready to retire, so I needed to find something else to fill some time in there. And so I was really excited about my high school opportunities here with agriculture and FFA. So I taught in Farmington until my dad retired in 1974. I expected that was the end of my teaching career. Farming full-time was my goal. Summer of 1977, Randolph came to me and said, you know, we're looking for an ag teacher. We've never had an ag program. We understand you got a little background. They finally wore me down, and I agreed to do it part-time for 1 year. At the end of the first week, I turned my letter of resignation in to my superintendent. At the end of that first year, they couldn't find anybody, so between my wife and my brother and I, we decided we could make it go 1 more year. And as I say, the next 40 years are just history. But it's been a tremendous ride, and like I say, just awesome. And I want these 2 kids here to turn around, show what's on the back of your shirt. These are my kids. To everybody else, they are young professionals in agriculture. But I don't have students, because guys like John, you know, I worked with starting when he was a freshman, through high school, through the end of his FFA career, and for many, many years I also taught a young farmer program in the evenings for guys who were starting, so I have, you know, a lot of connections. I've been to 3 weddings right here, for example, with former students, but we'll stand for any questions, right?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Can you read what was on the back of your t-shirts? It's hard to read, and I just want to be sure that the sentiment gets captured for...
It says we're not just FFA members, we're young professionals in agriculture.
Excellent, excellent. Well, what an amazing presentation, and I know board members will have questions and comments. Jeff.
Turn your mic on there.
Jeff Quinnell here. Thanks for your presentation. I love Randolph, by the way. My dad graduated from Randolph, Lance Quinnell, and my mom was from Cannon Falls, so I'm sure you've run into a lot of Quinnells over the years.
I've had a lot of Quinnells.
Yeah, so a lot of Randolph name there. One question I had is dating back, because I remember in the 80s, graduating here from the 80s, I'm a Northfield graduate. What happened in Northfield with our FFA, and then is this kind of a big collaborative that kind of joined and more around Randolph? Because we had a pretty strong FFA just in Northfield. So what was the migration? You covered all those years because you're back in '77, and then what happened in '94 through the '80s of how Northfield had an FFA program, and now you're kind of combining many different districts, it sounds.
Well, I probably need to be a little careful how I address this after the remarks about open mic. But basically, here's what happened, and I'll be very honest. That's one of my flaws, is I'm probably butt ugly honest too often. But we had a great ag program here. It started in 1939, and through the mid-70s into the 80s, it was very, very strong. You had American degree candidates, you had state officers that came from Northfield, etc. And ran into a situation where, I hate to say this, but the teacher who was here, the FFA advisor who was here, just kind of lost interest and let it run downhill. And, you know, with that said, you know, students lost interest in taking part. And so there was truly an FFA chapter here probably through about 92, but it had become very inactive. Nothing was really happening, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's good. So what have you done well then, obviously putting that together, and then how, as far as pulling from different areas, how did that kind of come together, and what's significant about 94?
Well, that's when the first student decided that they wanted an opportunity to study agriculture that was not available here in Northfield. And, you know, it started with one student. The next year there was 4. Then I had 8, and it kind of grows, and it varies a little bit. You know, they said in the presentation, you know, probably between a dozen and 15 is pretty average. Kind of hard to address this probably, but you know, Northfield is not really, the entire community is not really agriculture supportive. And without that, you know, it makes it very tough. That's the one thing that we have going for us in Randall, you know, is that a lot of support. You know, you think that, you look at our corn drive, you know, $300,000 from farmers in the area in 40 years' time. You know, 2002, a couple of kids came to me and said, you know, we'd like to drive our tractors to school to show support for agriculture and FFA during FFA week, which is in February. And I kind of thought about that, and I said, that's a pretty cold time of year. Let's maybe consider backing this up. So we did till early April, and the first year we had 27 tractors come to town. Wow. Typically now we're in that 120 range that come to town. 3 of the TV stations have been there to highlight this. We've had national coverage in national magazines with the things that we do. And I would say that, you know, a lot of the good ideas do not come from this guy right here. They come from people like this, you know.
Well, I appreciate, you know, your timeless effort on that. You got to have a quarterback behind that, so you're the Tom Brady of the NFL.
Well,
but I just appreciate your time and all your efforts. So thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? No.
I have to leave shortly, and that's not any indication of your presentation, which was wonderful. But I want to add a little bit more to what you said. You're exactly right on about how Randolph grew to provide a wonderful program. The Northfield program was winding down. The community, as you said, didn't see a real agricultural foundation in its community career. And I think there was a handshake that said, Randolph has got a wonderful program. If you continue that program, we'll continue to send our kids from Northfield to Randolph. And that may not be totally exactly right, but that's how I remember it. So,
yeah, and you know,
and with that, I've got to leave. I've got to be on the program over for at the senior center for a person who's getting an award, and it starts at 8. So I'm going to leave for a little while. With that, which explains it. We're doing a scene out of Jesse, where I stand up and say I'm a farmer and I got a plowshare and a hitch in the cattle car, and we're going to Lawrence, Kansas to farm.
Excellent. Thank you, Noel. Other board members' comments? Ellen?
So I would just like to echo the thanks for your service. It's just remarkable, the program, and hearing the students talk about the leadership, which is what I was thinking as you were presenting this, that this has to be, you know, not just the subject matter, but the leadership. And that comes from the sort of relationships that you've built. And so I wondered, you know, we've been looking at career and college ready at the high school and realizing students need to start learning what their passions are earlier. It gets expensive once they graduate from high school to figure that out and to gain that leadership experience. And what advice would you have? I mean, you have this long-standing program, Ed, and John, Derek, and Tasha being alumni and coming back. What advice would you give about other programs that could sort of instill that leadership and giving kids that sense of identity and interest?
Well, there's a couple things. I'm probably kind of traditional. I still teach the 3 R's, but it's responsibility, respect, and I think my most important job to these kids of mine is to be a role model. You know, and you know, I don't talk about my own farm. I don't want them to think that what I do is right or wrong on my own farm. But, you know, we have lots of experiences. You know, like John mentioned, you know, we go every year kind of as a recognition of all our efforts, one-day tour. And, you know, we fund everything. We are self-supporting as an ag department. I went there in 1977. I signed my name on the line, and the superintendent said, well, by the way, there's no money in the budget for ag. And so we have funded everything. Everything that's in that ag shop, every book, every video, every trip we've ever taken, we have funded every one of those things. And when we go to Waterloo, Iowa, we travel by charter bus. Pardon my French, but we don't take no stinking school bus that far. It would be uncomfortable. But, you know, trying to get them started early, thinking, and I talk about jobs, I talk about careers. We have people in, right after Christmas break, we had the CEO of River Country Co-op come in and talk a little bit about careers. I think it's important to both bring people in and get out in the community. You know, I think that a lot of people don't understand that there's so much education outside the building.
I can touch on your comment too, and I think Tasha wants to as well. Here at Northfield, I took a senior class. It had to deal with accounting and getting business started. I can't remember what the class was, but I know it was a 2-hour class where you had the opportunity to be an hour in the classroom, but then it also gave an opportunity to go work an hour after school at a job, kind of like an internship or a career type of thing. I know some of the students in that class that I took would be, one went to work at the Brick Oven Bakery and learned how to bake and learned their book side of things. And then just to help with accounting and public speaking. So we do have those classes here at Northfield, and I think those were a great asset also that helped me in FFA, is because I was able to combine all those leadership skills. And then also with a home building class, which I could not take because my schedule was already too full, but that was also another class that I heard great things about. And then, but that other accounting class, and I'm just ashamed that I can't remember what it was.
It was probably a school to work course.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of a combination, yep.
Yes, it was, yep. And so that was a huge help and would have been if I didn't have FFA also to help me along.
So in addition to what Ed said about community coming in and, you know, teaching students, when I was in college for my agribusiness degree, I actually had to do a presentation, and I contacted Ed and I came and I actually talked to the students about what I was doing in school and then gave a presentation about things that I was learning and stuff too. So that kind of also goes out and opens the kids' eyes as to what they can go out and see too. And leadership, and then also, you know, he guides us to take responsibility for things that we decide to do too. So that's helpful.
Yeah, one more slide. So I don't know if there's any more questions.
Yes, I believe we do.
Okay.
Amy.
I was just waiting to make sure It was my turn. So I just wanted to thank you all because I have learned a lot tonight. I really knew nothing about the FFA program, so I'm happy to hear that this program is available for our Northfield High School students. And I really love the passion you all have for it. It's really fun to hear the excitement and the enthusiasm you have in your voice. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming. And I have to ask a small town question to Derek. Are you related to Jeannie Eastrom?
Yes, I am.
I have bought fruit from you back in the day, and I bought pumpkins from somebody else this last year. So
We cooperated with Syngenta on those pumpkin sales.
yeah, my Halloween pumpkins came from you guys. So thank you all very much for coming.
Dr. Hillman, you had some comments.
Ed, I just want to thank you because we appreciate your modesty, but you have been the driving effort to keep this thing going. And you know, when we talk about school districts and the things that we want to offer for the people standing in front of you, alumni and current students, there are times where school districts on their own can't offer a program. And in many school districts, if they don't have enough people to offer a program such as this or something else, it just doesn't get offered. This is really a model relationship between two school districts that has lasted the test of time. Normally, these kinds of relationships fizzle, you know, after a period of time. But it's because the commitment of Ed, because the students that have been successful and who've shared with, you know, upcoming students the great stories and leadership opportunities that we've been able to keep it going. So we're really proud of this partnership. We're proud of the fact that we've been able to collaborate with the Randolph School District since 1994. That's a wonderful run. And there's nothing to tell us that it's going to stop anytime soon. So we really appreciate this collaboration because it is a model. Not many school districts do this kind of thing. And so we're really grateful for that, to offer this opportunity for the 20-some Northfield kids every year who want to do it. So thank you, Ed.
I just want to add one thing. I would really like to take you or one of your principals to the National Convention next year. And we will foot the bill.
Is it in India? Is it in Indianapolis or is it in?
It's in Indianapolis.
Okay.
It's the.
I would have preferred Louisville, but I'm just joking. Yes.
Beggars can't be choosers.
Very true. Very true. I know it well.
But we're serious. I have taken a couple of principals. I've taken a school board member, and we would really like to take somebody from Northfield, just so they can share in this experience with 65,000 Blue Jackets walking around in a town. It is awesome.
Well, we will make sure that we make that happen one way or the other in terms of one of our administrators getting a chance to go. We will figure that out, and we'll just make sure that we check that all of the financing is okay, because again, the superintendent says there's no budget for it. So
No, I am dead serious. We will foot the bill. I mean, it would be our privilege.
A very gracious offer, and I think it is good for us to be able to see firsthand. I have watched the FFA convention before, because in a previous district we had a pretty successful FFA program, and so watching our students it's a fun thing to watch on TV too. There's a lot of pretty cool things. It'd be neat to be there in person.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, any other questions? Jeff?
I just wanted to say that, Ed, you know, and your leadership team here, that, you know, you put measures in place to pass along your legacy and what the next generation has to hold, because you got something good here going, so just keep it going. So appreciate that.
Well, it's up to them.
Excellent. Well, any other questions or comments, final? Thank you so much for the amazing presentation, for being here tonight. This has just been outstanding. And I was telling John that often in the community, we're asked by the community, what are you doing to support, you know, agriculture business, and the number of professions, you know, around the agricultural industry. And so, you know, I felt like I knew enough to be dangerous, and now I know that much more. And I think that if anyone wants to look up what it takes to get the American degrees, it's incredible. My daughter's friend was able to achieve that high honor, and I think you described it a bit, but I think that you would be really absolutely amazed at the work and the effort that you had to do to get that degree. So thank you. And the fact that our Randolph chapter is so incredibly successful makes us very, very proud, and we're proud to be associated with it. And thank you for what you do for Northfield students and young people. So thank you.
We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come. There's some important dates I'll run by you guys. Our Farmer Supporter Appreciation Breakfast is Saturday, March 9th, 7 to 10 in the morning. It's Saturday, the Randolph High School pancakes, bacon, really good breakfast. Anyone's open to come to that. Our annual meeting and toy auction, which I would highly recommend any of you to come to. That is Monday, March 11th, 6:30 p.m. at the Randolph High School in the Commons. We have a short meeting and then open up a live auction basically for items that got donated from the community, toy tractors. We had that table, we had another table last year that we actually raffled off. It's pretty fun to come to, and anyone's welcome to come. Our tractor parade is April 12th, starting at 9 a.m. I'm hoping for a year without snow. I think the last 3 years I've washed the tractor before I went and when I got back. And then our annual awards banquet is May 8th at 7 in the Randolph High School Gymnasium. So,
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again. We appreciate it.
thank you.
And I do have a tractor for the superintendent to drive, too.
My uncle made me promise never to drive a tractor again, so.
I got a little one for you, but just right.
Excellent. Okay. We will move on to our second item for report. Director of Finance Val Murderstorff is here to present the financial forecast and the 2019-20 general fund budget plan. And just as a reminder, there was an updated PowerPoint presentation in your table file. So you want to ensure you're working with the updated one. Thank you. Welcome, Val.
Thank you. I'm definitely not that tall. Good evening. So I'm here to present the financial forecast and the budget plan. Maybe, there we go. So the things that I'm going to talk through are just the financial cycle that we have as a district, some of the known parameters, our current enrollment projection, the financial assumptions that I used in the model, and then primarily focusing on the 19-20 budget parameters, and then the budget presentation timeline for the coming spring. So this is the financial cycle that we have kind of adopted as a district, and I think it works really well. I'm actually presenting to some new, actually 51 new MASWO members taking a certification class next week, I believe. And this is the one of things that I talk about. I am actually presenting about why you should do a financial forecast. So the timing works out well for me in that regard. But this is one of the slides about why it's important to look at your data at strategic times throughout the year. And so we are doing the financial projection right now, and that's really utilizing the revised budget and the final audit results. And so the cycle works really well for me to be in front of you and the community, providing up-to-date information and always having those check-in points to make sure we're not ever getting off track. So some of the known parameters are that we ended fiscal 18 spending down about $1.3 million of our fund balance. It was intentional. We knew that we were going to the voters in November of 2017 asking for an increase to the referendum, and we had enough fund balance to cover the $1.3 million. Obviously, the referendum passed, which we are always very grateful for. And we do have steady enrollment. That is an assumption that I have. We've had increased enrollment every year for the last 8 years. And I will say that it's been kind of smoothing. We had a couple years where it jumped pretty dramatically and actually pushed off anticipated budget reductions. And now it's kind of just stabilized. The 18-19 revised budget, which was approved in December, is showing a surplus of about $434,000. We do know that 80% of our budget is salary and benefits because we are a people business. And that enrollment drives about 70% of our total revenue. So making sure that we're monitoring that and getting that accurate is fairly critical for this process. Also, this is the bottom bullet is new in the revised one that you had tonight. We will have a new building and some additional square footage beginning in 2020-21. So those are the assumptions that were a change from the one that was in your original packet. So the enrollment projection is an interesting process, and it's a little difficult to manage because there's quite a few unknowns, particularly with the open enrollment process in Minnesota. You're never really sure who's going to show up at the door. So the process that we use the schoolfinances.com enrollment model, which basically looks at our historical enrollment. It takes in the birth data for Rice County, for kindergarten assumptions, and it runs basically 17 different calculations, and then I get to examine them and decide which one I think is the most accurate for our current situation. For 1920, I am projecting decreased enrollment for the first time in 8 years. A couple things playing into that. All the models, just for the record, did show us dipping next year. Some of them more dramatically than others. But I think it shows a dip and then kind of just leveling out for the most part. We have a really large senior class right now, like 30 students more than most of the other grades. And I'm also projecting a small kindergarten class coming in. So those two things netting are resulting in the bulk of the decrease. Again, it's still showing true to Hazel Reinhardt's projections that 7-12 is still kind of on the higher end, and our elementary numbers show that they're going to start kind of declining slightly. So that does play a significant role in the financial projection, because declining enrollment typically means less revenue. So the assumptions that go into the model are always maintaining the 16% unassigned fund balance goal. We are still intending to grow the long-term facility maintenance fund balance. We bring in about $1.5 million, and so we intend to grow that a little bit, and that kind of plays into the total fund balance calculation. The per pupil basic formula, I have a 1% assumption in. I talked to most of the finance directors in the Big Nine, and all were fairly confident in 2%. Again, I prefer to be conservative. I'd rather come in June and say the legislature came through with 2% and this model will look better. But in case it doesn't, we're at 1%. Again, projecting declining enrollment, just slight declining enrollment. The voter-approved referendum does have the inflationary increase, and that is in there at 2%, I believe, for the inflation. The special ed funding is a challenging one, as you're aware, to kind of put your finger on. I do have it at a 2% increase this year instead of a 3%. 4% is built into the statute, but there are a lot of moving pieces with the way their calculation works. So I typically do 3% just to be conservative. However, this year, with the new flex hour at the high school, the way the model works is that our special ed teachers and educational assistants are doing general supervision, because we're not directing students where they can go and what they can do. They don't have to go to a special ed class. And the statutes are pretty clear about what we can and cannot code to special ed for reimbursement. And so general supervision is not reimbursable. So it's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for a teacher, and an EA typically. I'm estimating that cost at about $58,000 that will move from being funded by special ed to a general ed cost. And so the reimbursement is roughly $32,000 on that. Again, it's estimates as we're kind of working through the calculations and gathering that data, but that was not really an anticipated change when we were talking about the flex last year, but as we got into the year, high school principal Joel Lear and Cheryl Hall and myself met several times just to see if there were different ways we could structure the schedule. There weren't really any ways to add that without really restricting the students, which is really not the point of what we were going for with the flex. So, so that's something I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of. And then federal funding, always just holding that flat. Never really sure what's going to happen there, but we have, for the last several years, had just flat revenue with that, so that's been good. Or not bad, I should say. So for 1920, the aggregate increase for revenue is about 0.63%, which is obviously not a significant percentage. But again, would much rather be conservative now and be planful rather than reacting later. On the expenditure side, salary and benefits, the average across all of the different groups is about 2.5%. Again, in 2021, that does include about $200,000 for additional custodial staff at the new elementary. We don't believe with the additional square footage there would be a need for any other increased staffing. So it would just be about 3 FTE at the new elementary. We did see an increase in our life insurance premium. We had a 3-year contract that we renewed effective January 1st. We have seen a pretty substantial increase in our 403B participation, which is great for our employees. But again, that's a cost to the district. And a 2% increase for our non-salary. So basically all of our other supply and utilities and all those types of things. And again, in 2021, there's an extra $100,000 for custodial supplies and increased utilities across all the buildings and renovations. So the aggregate increase for 1920 is about 1.7%. That didn't change from the previous because the 2021 school year is where those additions were added from the original document you had. So I get that's real small and hard to read, but I'll try. I think this has a laser, right? Yep. So the estimated weighted pupil units is across the top here. And again, you can see that I'm projecting that to kind of slowly dip a little bit. And then the total revenue, again, the basic per pupil formula is 55% of our total revenue. So if we only get 1% on 55% of our revenue, that's a pretty significant piece to play with. Expenditures, again, salary, benefits, and then non-salary. So we're projecting about $54.4 million in total expenditures, $54.2 in revenue. So looking basically to spend down next year about $158,000, which for a $54 million budget is fairly balanced. And ending at about 18.3. And again, even though we're spending down only 158, because that long-term facility fund balance is increasing, that unrestricted, restricted balance changes slightly. So in case you had a question about that. And then really looking at potentially dipping below 16% in 2020-21. I think there's a lot of decision points between now and then. We certainly know that this is a legislative session and there's a lot of moving pieces that we won't know until basically until you're required to adopt the budget. And so we'll certainly keep an eye on that and cannot emphasize enough how important it is to be speaking with the legislative community and advocating on behalf of the district. That'll be very important because doubling, going from 1% to 2% on 55% of your revenue makes a difference, even if it's almost not even inflationary. It still will make a difference. Let's see if I had any other notes here. Really, our goal at this point is just managing our expenditure growth and making sure that we're very cognizant Again, our enrollment could come in completely different. We could have another burst of open enrollment, or there's a lot of different things that can happen between now and then. It is also a negotiation year for the teachers. And so that will be a significant piece as well that really sets up that total package for the future contracts. And so that's an important decision point as well that we'll work through this year. So I think, and the calendar. So this year I'm actually going to do the operating capital and LTFM budget at the next meeting, February 11th. Again, getting that approved ahead of time really helps set up our director of buildings or grounds to be able to get quotes and bids and get the projects scheduled, knowing that the funds are approved and ready to go. The expenditures don't happen until July, but just that planning process makes a lot of difference so that we get on people's schedules and get better pricing. April 22nd will be the debt service trust fund and internal service fund. And then May 13th will be child nutrition and community services. And then the general fund, May 28th. And then in June, all those budgets will get approved with the budget book to kind of consolidate all of that information. So I will take any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you. Always so well detailed and very understandable in terms of the process and how you are projecting the forecast and budget plan. So board members, questions, comments? Ellen.
So the revenue worksheet is sort of sobering, right? And in looking at the narrative, so I think we are all on board with talking to our local legislators about what could be done at the state level. But what's within our control is what happens at the district level. You know, we can only do so much lobbying. And in the narrative, you say it'll be critical to manage our expenditure growth in the coming years. Are there suggestions that you or Dr. Hillman would make to the board, like looking, we have, I know there's a lot of models that are in play that we don't know how they're going to roll out, and we know more about 1920 than we do 2021, but are there things as we make decisions, and we're making many decisions, thinking about the new buildings and other things that come before the board that we should keep in mind as we look at some of the forecasts and knowing that this bubble class is finally graduating and how enrollment drives so much?
Yep. So certainly internally we've had conversations about different pieces of the budget. I would say that's one of the things that I struggle with because there are so many pieces. It's hard to really detail analyze every piece of it every single year, and so it's typically kind of pockets each year that I get to look at. And so we do have a couple of ideas of things that we could just maybe restructure or think differently about that could result in some potential long-term savings. With the new buildings, certainly looking at energy efficiency and any long-term building savings is going to come back to the district will be really critical, and that will certainly be part of the process. Outside of that, again, until we really know where the legislature lands, so much of this is in flux, and so I think it's more just an awareness piece. We have a very strong fund balance still, and so, which is one of the best things that I appreciate about this district is it's the kind of the early warning system, as Dr. Hillman likes to refer to it. So we don't have to react immediately. We just can be aware and cognizant of it and be more proactive in our approach. So again, I think we'll know more when I come in May and June with the budget. It'll be a little more solid. We're going to try some new things to see if we can get kindergarten numbers sooner. All of those pieces come together to make the bigger picture. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but.
Excellent question. Dr. Hillman.
So I think, first of all, we really appreciate Val's work on this because the cycle does provide the opportunity for us to do these mid-flight analysis. This is what good financial management looks like. It is not as, we all have to look at ourselves and say, oh my God, we're worried about 18.3% fund balance. I mean, there's a lot of districts that would be killing to have that amount. But this is exactly why we do it the way that we do it. It is to catch things that impact our district dramatically early. It's about being conservative, with the figures, and it's about trying to analyze our programming and are we doing the best for the money that we're paying for that. So one piece straight out of the gate that we have built in that is something that we have control over is contingency. So over the past few years, I've asked you to increase the contingency fund, and just to reiterate for people, contingency is a set of full-time equivalent positions that the district uses to look at reducing class size each year, and at the end of each year it comes back. And so we have an opportunity to reassign those each year. One of the pieces that we can do immediately is be very judicious about spending that contingency, because it's not existing positions, it's not a reduction, it simply is something that we can say we can just be very much more judicious. We are judicious with it, we try to put it in places, but we don't necessarily, we may choose not to spend that to begin with until we know what some of the reality of the legislature is. Now, of course, when you withhold that, there is some consequence to that. However, that's one of the reasons we do contingency, right? Is that we don't have to assign it each year. So I think that that's one piece. The other thing, an exercise that we've been working through with our administrative team this year as a professional learning group is Val has been leading us through something that's called the Smarter Spending Framework. And so, for example, this last Friday, we spent 2.5 hours where every administrator took one program under their purview, deeply analyzed it, suggested first of all, explained how much it costs. They looked at the metrics that they're using to determine is it successful or not, and then had an opportunity to dialogue about those. So that's some of the pieces that we're looking at for efficiencies. And then finally, I want to reiterate what Val said about the new facility. One of the pieces that we really need to emphasize is using bond money to create facilities and improving facilities into where we are realizing operational savings over time. So when you have a bond, it's the one golden opportunity to say, can we put systems in that will be energy efficient and will save operational costs over time? There's a number of different things that you can do to do that. Energy efficiency is the one that comes right away, but there are also other things that you can do within a facility to save operational costs over time. A 2-story facility, for example. We are going to have a 2-story facility. We know that saves us operational costs over time because it's more efficient to heat, those kinds of things. So what I want you to be aware is that we're scrutinizing, and one of the unpopular questions that Val and I ask when people want to do something new, which we're all for. We're for innovation, we're looking at things differently, but one of the things that we ask is, we can do lots of things, but what are we going to give up in order to get that? And so many districts don't ask that question, and that's a very hard question to answer, because we would not offer things if we did not think it had value. The days of having, items that are not valued, they were gone a long time ago. Everything that we offer or do within the school district has value to students and to families. So when we want to do something new, we ask ourselves, what would we stop doing? If this is so important for us to do, what would we stop doing in order to make that happen? Those questions are hard, and because people do value what we have. So this is the early warning system, and we're using this to make sure we think we can make it to 16% in 2020-21. But even if you remember, when we went out for the operating level, we only said we could get to 2021, because that is what happens when the state, and here's the annual rant, does not keep up with inflation for 30 years. It'd be nice to have another 2,000 and plus change per kid, which we would get by just a matched inflation. Our groups in the lobbying is important. Our groups that we belong to, Schools for Equity and Ed, Minnesota School Board Association, MASA, we are all strongly advocating for 3 and 3, 3% in the first year, 3% in the second year, and we are really going after that the state should now tie the basic formula to inflation. And if there was ever a chance for school districts to get that, this is the legislative session for that to happen. If it doesn't, I don't think there's another chance for a long time. So we really need to speak about this, because we can't keep playing catch up. And I point you to Governor Walz's comments over the weekend. There was a great article in the Star Tribune talking about how he wants to fully fund education and make school districts less dependent upon property taxes and operating levies. We've heard this before, and we shall see. But we will engage, and we will do both the things that we can control and we will also try to influence the legislature to the best of our ability.
Excellent. Other questions, comments? I had a question about a couple of one of the projections. You talked about the special education funding, the special education piece. And I'm wondering, of late we've had some increases where we've had to increase positions, and they aren't always fully reimbursable. So have you adjusted those kinds of numbers going forward? So we are in a reactionary mode, obviously, with those types of expenditures because it's based on the students that we don't know necessarily where their needs are, and we're guided by federal mandates. But how are you able to even sort of manage that from a projection versus sort of where we've had to be reactionary?
So it's challenging. Again, it really plays to the importance of the cycle because the revised budget really, I do a deep dive after everybody's hired. We know who the staff are, where they're working, where they're getting paid, what their hours are, all of those things for the most part. And so from June to December, the December number for staffing is much more solid. And so anything that happened between June and December gets picked up in that. And a lot of times it's at the beginning of the year where we see those. This mid-year January thing is fairly unusual in that regard. And again, the mid-year ones are less impactful because it's for half a year versus the entire year. Yeah. And so the cost extrapolation is different. So again, the cycle works really well for that because it picks up the vast majority of that in December for the revised budget. And again, the projection piece is really going off historical averages for the most part and any really known up and downs. So the flex piece was a known thing that we're going to have, and so I was able to build that in to the projection. But these kind of mid-year, last-minute ones are pretty difficult to do. Sure. And so I typically just have, again, I'm conservative for a reason, to build in a little bit of a buffer for some of those things so that we're really not super reactive, if that makes sense.
Excellent. And then my last question was about the elimination of the class fees at the middle school and the high school. Yeah. We realized that in last year's budget, and I'm assuming that was successful when we're going forward, so that impact has really already been realized of the previous budget.
Yep, that was in last year's budget, the budget to actuals, and forecasted forward. And I think, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, I think that was about 40 or 50,000 in revenue, right off the top of my head. I will say I think that Hope and Joel did some analysis about if we were seeing the intended impact of that, and I think overall that was a fairly positive look at making sure that we had some more student groups enrolling and being able to access that type of programming. So I had another thought.
I think part of that, in a conversation with Michael O'Keefe from the middle school and the Finance Advisory Committee, we talked about how that came to be, and not necessarily the opportunity for students to really realize that was now in place, and that we would potentially see more students taking advantage of that as they become more aware of it. And we have the CCR on Tuesdays during flex hour, and so there's more opportunity to really engage students around what that's an option available, those classes that they may not have realized before.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments about this? Okay, thanks, Val. Always excellent. We have. Oh, I'm sorry.
Are
Jeff.
on this 2021?
Turn your mic on, Jeff.
Are you saying that for the 2021, do we want to be around instead of 14, around 16? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and the number on the bottom there is the total, like it's 8 million something. That's what 16% would be. So that would be the goal number that we would be shooting for in terms of dollar amount to save. So.
Excellent. Thank you. We look forward to another cycle. Okay, so our next presentation is a Technology Services update. Kim Brisky, Director of Technology Services, is here to present, and as you know, her PowerPoint was in our board packet.
All right, well, thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here giving this update, and mostly there's a little bit that follows up on my last update to the school board, and then a bit about our student device refresh process as well, which we are in the midst of. So I always start out with our mission. Of course, our Technology Services Department is here solely for the purpose of supporting the mission of the Northfield Public Schools. So our department's work is very focused on the instructional and the learning elements that go into making this a great place for our kids to come to school and for our teachers to teach. So that's the goal with all that we're doing. In line with that goal, as you know, we've been working with Studer Education, and we did the district services surveys, and so we got feedback about our technology services and how our buildings are perceiving that service, and our biggest area for growth was in timeliness. So we took that on with our technology team and looked at some action steps that could help us improve our timeliness, and those are listed there. That at each week, we meet on Tuesdays of every week, not this week, but at each week we will have 0 new tickets from the previous week. That's been a long stretch of about 7 or 8 weeks since we started that goal that we've been able to achieve that. So we're tracking that each week. And then we also have a weekly communication going on with building principals and district administrators just to recap what's going on in their buildings, make sure that they know any issues that we've seen, and to ask if there's anything that they have seen that we are missing. And I think those have been helping us to support the district even better. Last time I also talked about our capital projects coming up, some of the ideas that we had for capital projects for fiscal year 20. As Val said, that budget gets to come next meeting. But in those approvals this year, we do have some pretty sizable computer lab replacements here at the high school. The graphics and art lab, which is a Mac lab where we have film and digital photography courses being taught. They have been doing so much more with the equipment that they have and the software that they have and the projects that they are now working through, that their computers do not keep up anymore. And they still have very nice computers there. But those will be replaced with really state-of-the-art machines. Mm-hmm. Same for engineering with Mark Waitala's lab, replaced with very nice machines to keep all of the programs that he is running there with pretty high-tech demands on those machines. And then also the business lab for Julie Woolner here at the high school will be replaced. These are kind of an overview of some of the bigger projects, of course. Improvements to Wi-Fi, that continues to be a #1 request, is continue to make the Wi-Fi better and better and better. So we're starting here at the high school in the H wing and the D wing, and it's also looking like we might be able to get into some of the S wing with the funds that we approved, going with an access point in each of those classrooms. And it's basically a changed model of design from the time that we started our wireless infrastructure here in Northfield to what's really the best solution now. So we're going bit by bit to replace some items here at the high school. We will reuse the access points that we take out of the high school. They will go first to the middle school. For community spaces, we have a couple of big projects. Digital signage, that is happening at the middle school cafeteria. They have 2 big monitors in that cafeteria. The hope is to be able to pull what is going on in the auditorium and share some of that out to that space, as well as to the music classrooms. So when we have a concert, the music students can be in the music classrooms and see a stream of what is happening in the auditorium so that they know when to go on stage. This is not meant to be, at this point, some very highly edited presentation for the public, but something that is informative to people in a very close-by space. And it will also be used daily by the middle school for announcements and pieces of information they want for their students. At Bridgewater, we will take the projector that they have in the gym. They purchased with PTO funds a very large, nice projector, and we'll mount that to the ceiling and run some wiring and a set of inputs, put in some new speakers, so they'll have an AV system that really supports their public presentations, much like the Veterans Day presentation event that they do at Bridgewater. And then the big one is our student devices, so much of this presentation will focus on that. This fall, we did complete our licensed staff survey again. This is the same survey that we completed last fall and in the winter of last year. This survey was developed with the NEA and district administrators all together to craft the questions and such. It was really to see the implementation of the MacBooks for last year with the teachers and how that was going and the teacher feedback on how that was going. Of course, we included some other questions on classroom technology as well. It really does focus on the classroom level. This is the third time then that we've done the survey. The questions about MacBooks were exactly the same as they were last fall. And then we added a section about capital tech requests so that we could get some feedback from teachers about what are the things that you really think you need in your classrooms to be effective in your instruction. And then also some student device preferences, so you can see those results in this presentation. This photo is dark and hard to see. It's Robert Garcia presenting at the TIES conference, and there he is with his computer and his iPad and whatnot. It does not get old for me to see our teachers out and about with their computers and using them and being productive and doing new things that in the past they have not been able to do. So it's an exciting thing. The feedback from this year was very positive. We saw improvements in the teacher satisfaction with their laptops, improvements in the functionality, and improvements in their efficiency. I did link in the packet, if you went to the link or if you go to the link later, you can see the full survey results. There's a lot of information there, so I'll just highlight a couple of areas here. These are about the first week of school. So this is the go time when we bring all of our staff who've been gone for the summer back in, and they need everything working within 3 days. It's week 5 this year, so it was a little bit different. But it's a quick time to make sure everything is up and running in the classrooms. And by the end of that first week of school, this image shows last fall's feedback and this fall's feedback. So in 2017, we had about 80% of our teachers who said by the end of that first week, they had the software applications needed for their position functioning on their computer. This year, we were up to just shy of 92%. So that was a pretty solid theme throughout the surveys, that we saw a shift in that, yep, always or most of the time I had everything I needed. And we saw a decrease in some of the sometimes or rarely or none of the time. So you can see that last year 7% said rarely or none of the time did they have the software. This year we had 0.5%. So that's the kind of change that we were looking for. Well, we're looking for 0 in that rarely to never, but that's pretty close. By the end of the first week of school, I had the hardware or the peripheral devices needed for my position. So these are external pieces of things, technology equipment, working. You can see a pretty big improvement here from 71.2% last fall that said all or most of the time to, again, 91.8% who said all or most of the time this fall. So that first week of school, the majority of our teachers were there ready to go with everything that they needed working. And the same kind of trend when you look at this one. And this is where, oh yeah, this is the classroom technology. So this would be projectors and smart boards and pieces like that. Whatever is connected to their computer is ready to use. If you look at last year, it's painful. In 2017, we had 60% who said all or most of the time, and this year we're at 91.2%, which is just such a nice increase to see, and to see that people are more confident with the equipment, I think. And we worked through issues that came up that were unanticipated, and you see also the drastic reduction in those sometimes or rarely or none of the time responses. Maybe less anticipated would be this type of question that says the change to MacBooks makes my daily teaching more efficient. Change is hard. If you've worked through change process with people, we have people who have done things in certain ways for a very long time here. And we upended that. You access your resources in a different way. You connect to your classroom equipment in a different way. You can come and go. You might use your space differently. We have people now that don't even remember that they have a wired connection. When I ask if you are connecting to your projector via Apple TV wirelessly or with a hard wire, they say, well, I don't even have a hard wire. Well, they do. It's somewhere in their classroom. They just moved around and they don't remember that they used to use that. So we have seen the change happen in a way that now people have formed some new habits. And I think we're starting to see that really improve efficiency and outcomes for our students. As far as student devices, like I said, we added a section to that survey about student devices. So this is where we asked teachers really just very clearly, I'll get to the question in a moment, what they wanted for student devices in their classrooms. So we conducted that survey. We also formed a focus group. At my last presentation, we were just starting to put that together. There's a list in your packet that shows all the members of that focus group. That was in the district staff newsletter a few times. They got some emails that said, hey, if you would like to participate, please sign up. And then I also invited people to make sure that we had representation from all of our buildings and multiple grade levels and programs and such. So you can see the list is pretty broad in who we have in that group. We met in December to review the feedback from the survey, and we tried to answer questions about what's going well and what do people need. It's not always easy in the survey results to see what exactly people mean by their responses. That discussion was great and led us forward in some of what do we need to still gather information-wise and some of what we could actually see from the feedback. We were supposed to have Apple and CDWG here today to present to us on student devices. They didn't come. We didn't meet. So we are looking to reschedule those. Right now we'll either use that February 25th meeting for those presentations or March 4th is being tossed around right now, but coming up in about the next month or so, we'll have that presentation rescheduled, and whichever one of those dates we don't use for those presentations, we'll use for our other meeting with the group to talk about our learning needs. So that's the next goal with that group, is to really look at what are the apps and programs and things that we're using in our teaching and learning that we rely upon for our students, and what devices are going to be able to provide the tools that we need, and what are the things that we're not doing because they're not available to us or we're uncertain about them. And then the last piece is parent and student surveys that are being developed right now. I have prompted this group to say, hey, what are the things that you want to make sure we find out in our parent and our student feedback? And we will come back to them. Hope and I are also working on some questions for parents and students. So as I said, we've got that group put together. That focus group, it includes those 36 members. You have a list of those, district level and building level positions. The question that we really looked at in this group is, this was the exact phrasing of the question in the survey, our iPad leases will be up in the summer of 2019. And as we plan for student devices this fall and winter, at this current planning time, for implementation in the next school year, 1920, what devices would you like us to consider? And there were 3 options: full-size iPads, Chromebooks, or other, and you could write in, you had to write in if you chose other. And then you can see what we actually got. And so no device preference given means that they didn't check anything for that question. Prefer full-size iPad means that they only checked prefer full-size iPad. Prefer Chromebook means that they only checked the Chromebook option. And then the bottom one, prefer full-size iPad and Chromebook, means that they checked them both. So we have multiple responses here about what people would like. You can see across the district, we have a pretty high percentage of people who say go with the iPad. It's what they're used to. And a few that say Chromebook at each of our buildings, until you get to the high school where you see 22 said that they prefer the full-size iPad and 20 said that they prefer a Chromebook. 13 didn't give an answer, and 3 of them chose both of those. So that's where the real question comes into play of what do our teachers want to see here, and what are the things that they are wanting their students to be able to do with the devices in front of them. Just back on that, the comments I included in the board packet, you could see what people wrote in on that question, and the next question actually had some open space where like just additional suggestions. If they were about the devices, I put them there, and I lined them up with what they actually had checked. So you should see columns and rows that align. Bridgewater staff who said no device preference, if they made a comment, it's there. So some people said didn't give a device preference, but said 1-to-1 iPads in the comment. Something like that happened. So what are the options? Right now we're really looking at 2 different ones. A full-size iPad would be one. and a Chromebook would be another. Now, that doesn't mean actually that there's only 2 devices, I guess, because Chromebooks have a whole slew of options, and so we're going to delve into that. But I did have a question about being able to show devices, so I'm going to do that quickly. The full-size iPad is now kind of the basic model. It's what Matt's using right there as well. So it's a fairly efficient tool. It is compatible with the Apple Pencil, which is a new piece with the full-size iPad, and that is something that I wouldn't anticipate purchasing for students. It's a budget kind of thing. I would anticipate potentially having something like this in art, though, or in certain classes where they might be able to use them. It allows for a very natural handwriting experience. So that's the full-size iPad. It's kind of the basic model these days. There's still is a mini available. The mini is a larger storage model now and a more expensive model. And I think most of our staff have said, a few did say that they want iPad minis. But this device for things that we're doing in terms of assessment and whatnot has been a reliable one. And then the other option would be a Chromebook. Right now we only have Chromebooks on a cart model, and we have pretty basic models of Chromebooks here. They look something like this. So it looks much like a laptop. It's a device that accesses mostly internet-based items. You can get apps on Chromebooks. This one has a forward-facing camera. You can get some that have a one that faces outward or that can flip over. You can also, as the picture shows here, which again is kind of dark, that one is one that flips all the way back and has a touch screen. Because we are used to touch screens here, I would imagine looking at a touchscreen Chromebook, if that's the way we're going to go. Main addition is an integrated keyboard. So some requests, we do have keyboards that plug in for our iPads in various departments. We oftentimes see that when students are working on a project, a teacher has said, here are keyboards, take one if you'd like one, and we get some do and some don't. And so it's a need that some people, or it's something that some people would like to see and that some maybe don't care about. So that's in the parent feedback too. That's one of the things we're looking at. What do you need your device to do? Do you need it to have a camera? Do you need it to be able to record video? Do you need it to have a touch screen? Do you need it to have a keyboard? What are the important pieces? And portability of the devices as well. We send these with students. We do pay for repairs on these, and so we want to make sure that we can protect the investment of them as well. So right now those are the 2 that we're looking at. We have a few that say, why not go laptops? We could, except for after Val's presentation, we can't. No, the goal is to stay in the exact same funding that we have right now. So these are MacBook Airs. That's what also has been a suggestion. It's a full-blown computer, and they're about $1,000 a piece. So we're not looking at those as an option for student devices at this point in time. So what are the next steps? Review our current practices. What are the things that we are using our devices for in our classrooms? What do our teachers want them to do? What do our students want them to do? What do our parents want them to do? That involves the actual projects. That involves the management of the devices. Can we send them directly to websites we need them at? Can we block some certain things? All of that. What are the expectations of using the devices? And then what are those future desires? That's a little harder to pinpoint. What are you looking to be able to do as times are changing and there are projects that you've thought about and ways that you've thought about connecting with your students or seeing their work, their learning demonstrated? What would you like to see? Whatever we decide, we have to look at what are the professional learning needs for that device. So we will also look into that and then look to recommend a device to best fit whatever feedback we have coming in this process. So that's what we're looking to. When you look at our current leases, like I said, we are looking to stay in the exact same amount of spending annually. Remember, we did do a 3-phase lease implementation at the last time. This is exactly the same slide that I showed you at my last presentation. So we have completely paid for the phase 1, which is 910 iPad mini 2s. We own those at this point in time. The phase 2 is the iPad Air 1s that are used by our middle and high school students. That's 2,650 devices. We made our 3rd payment in July. So we have one remaining payment, but we did book half of that payment early because we took possession of those devices in January and began using them in January. And we did not pay until July. So in that first year, we booked half of the cost. So the remaining payment on the books is $136 on that one. And then the phase 3 is our last iPad Mini 2s that filled in at our elementary classrooms. There are 480 of those, and we have made our third payment on those, and there's a $35,000 payment remaining on those. So year over year, total spending on our leases looks like this. In fiscal year 16, that's where we had the overlap of our old student lease of iPads, so that's where that $330,000 at the top comes from. So that was definitely a bubble. And then, and you can also see half of the phase 2 of our lease was booked there with that 136 too. We have maintained about the same at $422,000 or so for each of the years since. And if we look at fiscal year 20, those are the remaining payments we have. I'm very confident we will cover those payments with the resale of our devices. So I think at this point, if we were able to resell our devices for about $40 each, our iPads that we have right now, we would cover that, and I anticipate we will get significantly more than $40 a piece for those. We do have enrollment considerations. This has been my ongoing question, guessing, trying to estimate. I went into Val's office last week and I said, here's what I'm looking at. And I was looking at all past enrollment, and she was, of course, working on her enrollment projections. And we line right up for like 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. We're pretty close, which is great when we're looking at completely different ways of seeing this. What I've seen is that when we look at 15, 16, when we were making the decision on our current lease, we have about 150 more students in our one-to-one environment, and so we have had to scramble a bit to go, whoa, we need some more devices, and we have purchased additional devices. So there have been a couple of one-off purchases of devices to supplement growth in enrollment. And then when we look at our upcoming projections, we see a decline in elementary, some stability in our 7-12, a small decline there. But then we also have to go, what happens when we get one of those bubble years like our current seniors? And we've seen this group come through, so we've kind of known that they're coming. But I question what happens in 6th grade next year, because that's the biggest question where people are coming into our district in 6th grade or in 9th grade, I think. So there's some work to try to get this as close as we can for the devices that we need, and also not go overboard, because we're trying to be good stewards with our resources, of course. So that's what we're looking at right now to go, what are the options? And right now the options are pretty open. We're looking into them. So there's not a decision on the table. There are some questions, there are some financial projections from vendors coming, there's conversations about what are the device possibilities, but at this point, not decisions. And with that, I would entertain questions.
Excellent presentation, thank you. Board members, questions, comments? Tom?
Thanks for bringing in the different models. I've never seen a Chromebook. So since I occasionally fix things like this, do you have any data on how well the Chromebooks hold up, given that you have something that opens and closes and it's on a hinge?
The hinge is the most vulnerable point.
Right.
That's what I know. Clear data, only a couple of districts that I've talked to, and it's anecdotal. I will ask for some, I want to know your actual percentage of repairs. Right now I only have that from one district, so I don't think I can say it and have it be representative. It concerns me a little bit, but it's not a deal breaker.
And how are the iPads been as far as maintenance or problems with them?
We see about 10% per year of needing to repair something on our iPads. It's a little lower in the start, and then it comes up to about that 10% level of our total amount of iPads that we have. It is fully covered by the insurance at this point in time. We have reduced our insurance cost to families, and it is optional. And since students have taken the devices home during the summer, we don't have that point in time where families come in to get their device and they go, oh, I should pay the insurance for this year. So we've seen a decrease in the insurance revenue. At this point, it is still covering the repairs. We might have to look a little bit at how we how we use that insurance fund and how we promote that insurance.
And the Chromebook would be insured also then?
Yeah,
for
we would do
the
something
same
similar.
thing?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Great questions. Other questions? Oh, Val, comment.
I was just going to say, as a reminder for the board, all of the lease payments come out of our capital budget. And so those payments will be included in the presentation that I do at the next board meeting, but just as a reminder.
Excellent reminder. Thank you. Amy?
So I just have a question about how it's a lease and we own it.
So Apple offers multiple leasing models. I'm not fully familiar with our Chromebook options yet, so I don't know if they match up or they do not. With Apple, you can do a fair market value lease, which is that you pay for the devices, and then at the end, Apple takes them back. You can also do a model that's called their 4-3 lease model, which is a 4-year lease. But at the 3rd year, you have the option to leverage the value in those to update. And so you could say like our 3rd phase here that we have the 4th payment upcoming on, I've already posed to Apple that we would entertain either returning those and having that $35,000 either canceled out with the return of the devices or having some nominal above or below payment to go into the next lease. Or we would keep them and just pay one more time on them and start a new lease and keep those iPads. They have a $1 buyout option at the end of the lease, essentially. So when you get to the end of that 4 years, if you haven't taken the opportunity at 3 years to return them and take whatever Apple will pay you for them, the value that they see in them at that time, you own the devices if you've paid the 4th year.
And Kim, I would add to that, so the first lease that we did, we returned them, and how much did we pay to Apple for that? Do you remember?
I believe it was $60,000.
Yeah,
So what they expect on the fair market value is that you return devices to them that are in the same condition as when you got them. So if you can imagine 3.5 years of student use on an iPad, they have some scratches, and we got charged for every single scratch. We won't have that this year. We also did have a handful of devices because in the last lease we also purchased some to supplement, and so we had more at the end of our lease than we had to return with that lease, and we sold those. And at that point, that iPad was not updatable anymore, and we still managed to get $50 to $70 per device on some of them. Some of them that were more damaged, we got $30 or $40.
Question, Jeff?
So what other options are there for reselling other than selling back to Apple?
Oh, there are all sorts of vendors that come in and want to buy our, I get about 15 emails a day from people who want to buy our recycled tech equipment. There are tons of vendors. So we would get multiple quotes to resell.
Other questions, comments? So I had a couple. First of all, we don't want to gloss over the work you're doing on greater service to the district and your goal of 0 new help tickets from the previous week. I think that's really good and very nice work, and providing the weekly updates to building principals about what's happening around technology projects. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
that's really
that's
good. Also, the process that you've laid out is really comprehensive, and it really encompasses all of the, this is a lot of big questions and issues to tackle here in terms of what's next. So what is the projected timeline for the parent-student surveys to go out? What are you envisioning there?
Soonish.
Okay.
If we could have met today,
sure,
I would have liked to finalize questions on those even,
Okay.
or at least give questions and say, here, give some feedback. But certainly within the month of February.
Okay. And then the Chromebooks, where are those currently being used? I know the high school had a large percent of those who were supportive of Chromebook. Is 9th grade Academy still using Chromebook?
They have just a few Chromebooks in a space where students can go. It's a study space and they can use a Chromebook there. We have a cart of them. Actually, this Chromebook that I have underneath here came from the cart here on my way into the media center. I just grabbed it out of there. And that gets checked out daily by teachers to use in their classroom.
Okay.
We have a cart at Bridgewater. Actually, we have 2 carts at Bridgewater, one at Sibley and one at Greenville.
Okay. And then the issues around testing. So when we first in 2013 probably didn't, I don't recall the conversations or how we saw that evolve. But the testing is being done on the iPad currently,
It's our
correct?
most successful testing.
Right.
tool.
So, I mean, that's just really such a significant piece of this. With Chromebooks, obviously, all these are the kinds of decisions you have. So, I think just sitting here realizing where you're at with having to make these decisions and the number of factors that you have to really decide how to move forward. So, my question then is, when do you see the board needing to make the ultimate decision about how we move forward with devices?
Well, I think we would want to give a couple of meetings to get the information. I talked to Matt today about the possibility of coming March 11th.
Okay.
So.
Not asking you for the decision
No,
that day,
just
it's coming
present.
to the recommendation.
Okay.
One of the things that we've always liked about the lease strategy going all the way back is it puts some decision points in. But this is the kind of purchase we would never ask you to approve at a single meeting. We'd bring the recommendation and then give you the chance to, to vote on it the next time. I want to echo what Julie said. Kim has done a very good job with this process of making sure that people have had an opportunity to provide their voice in the process. There'll be more of that as time goes on. The question about assessment, boy, has that changed in just a short amount of time. When we visited schools on our tours just a couple of, last week, we're seeing schools that no longer have computer labs, and we're awfully close to that ourselves. When we look at the assessment and the Chromebook versus the iPad, there's no question the Chromebooks can do it, but if you talk to our folks, the iPad is far more stable in terms of running that assessment. Students can stay in their own room, in their classrooms. It becomes a much better, experience. And if you walk through the halls at the high school any day, you see every class period, kids out in the hallway, video recording video or scripting something. There's a lot of that kind of day-to-day use. I wouldn't say that we have gotten all the way to the redefinition yet that we have sought after in terms of the SAMR model, for those of you who remember that. But we've come a long way. We anticipate that another round of the lease is going to, and more functionality in the devices is going to increase that. So Chromebooks are a very good option. But I think, interesting, the iPad now, a very powerful device at $299.
It's
$299 a piece. Remember when we first, we were talking when we were really happy that he got under $400. For a touchscreen Chromebook, we're going to pay more than that.
Yeah, I think you can get into a touchscreen Chromebook for about $325. Residual value is another consideration. We will offset some of our lease payment because we can resell these. Chromebooks cannot be resold for the same amount. They can be resold. It's just for not as much money at the end. I will say a Chromebook like the one pictured here can do that type of recording, which is something that I'm pretty passionate about keeping. I have to kind of check my passions a little bit because I want to hear what are the passions of our teachers. But we see that so often. And when I think about even change process with our MacBook implementation and how we changed habits, we can move forward with an iPad that will work in a similar way, or a Chromebook that will work in a very different way for deployment and for even repair shop that we use and for process of setting one up. And that's fine. If that's what we're looking to do and that's what we hear people are excited about and have their energy behind, that's where we'll go. I will keep in mind the amount of change, and that's where that work of finding out what are the things that we're currently using. Actually, Hope Langston and I are going teacher to teacher right now to ask, what are the tools you're using? Part of that is for our spending. We want to know what things we're actually purchasing across the district as technology platforms, and could we streamline some of that? But for digital curriculum tools, what are the ones that you need in your classroom, and can we make sure that all of those will work on either device?
Julie, if I can make one final comment.
Yes.
We want to thank the Tech Services Department, because how many devices are we managing today, Kim?
That's a good question that I didn't fully come prepared for, but we have over 4,000 iPads in play.
So we have 4,000 iPads. We moved to MacBooks for each teacher, and we have the
Chromebook
same
carts.
amount of technology staffing that we had before that. So just think about that for a moment, that prior to moving from a desktop-based model with no student devices, we now have the same number of technicians who are working to support these that we had before that. And so I really appreciate the Technology Services Department has really embraced our partnership with Student Education and continuous improvement. You saw that in the report. And so they do a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And while 10% for a lot of people, as Tom asked that before, sounds like a lot, when you think about the number of devices that we have and all those kinds of things, the Tech Services Department is doing an excellent job with a very limited staff, very lean staff is what I want to say, to manage that. So we're grateful for them, and no one ever calls Nate Knudsen, our network manager, and says, hey, the network's been up for 362 days in a row. It's when you have that one outage that people notice it. And a good Technology Services Department, it's like a good referee in a basketball game, right? You don't always notice that they're there because the stuff just works.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Ellen, you had a comment.
I just had a follow-up question. So thanks for excellent presentation. So it's a follow-up because of the timeline. So potentially coming to the board with a recommendation around March 11th. So I was going back on the timeline you had. So it sounds like because of the weather, the device presentation. So it's like you're launching the parent and student survey soon. You're doing this. You and Hope are going person to person.
There's a lot of information.
Yeah, and then you're going to do this review of current practices, and then hopefully get the device presentation in, and then so that's a pretty aggressive timeline. But it sounds like you've been collecting data all along. So, and you have sort of the variables of the different facets of things that you're going to consider to get to the point where you'd be ready for a recommendation.
And posing here's what we're looking at to the focus group before they have the actual data.
Okay. And it's really nice to have the full set of names of see how many people have been involved. So you've really engaged a really great cross section. So thanks for including that.
You bet. Thank you. Jeff, you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess if the price has gone down over time, I mean, still as opposed to capital lease of buying, is that an option, or you just end up with something in 3 years that's just obsolete, or just makes it easier to?
It changes quickly, so we know we're going to want to refresh on the 3 or 4 year cycle. We're not going to want to keep devices much past that. It allows us to refresh everything at one time as well. So the leasing rate is exceptionally low, like less than 1%. And of course, I haven't seen it for this lease that we would enter into yet, but that's traditionally been just under 1% for our leasing rate. So we essentially pay the cost. We get a little bit of a discount for buying in bulk as well. We essentially pay the cost of the device, but over the 3 to 4 years, which if we had to pay the full cost of the device up front, there would be no chance of our budget supporting that kind of a payment. We could roll it out, portions at a time potentially, but not do the whole shift.
Okay, and secondly, I remember when we started this whole process, it's kind of like, we're all about, does Apple dominate the K-12 market? Or, even before, can kids do anything with their Android devices to work with the school district, or you're not Android at all?
Android has come together with Google Play for their apps. So a Google device can now get all of the Android apps, essentially. Can you use them? Yes. Does Apple dominate? I wouldn't say they dominate. Are they strong in education? Yes. Partly because of the management of the devices. We have a very robust tool for enrolling our devices with students and knowing which student is where, being able to deploy the pieces that they need. So, example, Minnesota student survey is coming up. We'll put an icon on each iPad's screen. It's supposed to be today for that survey. And they will access it, and boom, right there. It's no longer a teacher-provided link on Schoology kind of piece. It's enabled to manage some of those district-level pieces. If we have behavior concerns, pieces like that, we're able to very easily deploy our configuration profile to a small group of students that says, hey, you don't have internet. And so it's responsive to the needs of our administrators who see issues in classrooms, or our teachers who see issues and bring them to the administration, or our parents who see some needs for their students as well. Not to say you can't do that also with a Chromebook. You can. An Android tablet is not common in education. I don't know of a district that is doing an Android tablet. A Google tablet has now come out. So there's some options, a Chrome tablet. there are some options there. If we were going tablet though, I think the main drive with a Chromebook is the keyboard. So if we were going to go tablet, I would see no reason to shift from an iPad where we're very well versed. We have about 500 apps in our app catalog, so those are all from the iTunes store deployed out to our iPads as needed. So elementary, middle, high school, grade levels, teachers. Some of them are purchased with teacher classroom budgets. Those kinds of things all need to be replaced if we change as well. So we can change. We have to take into account what we're doing. Like the American history textbook and the world history textbook are iBooks right now. Can they be different? Yep. But we have to take into account the purchasing price of that on a different licensing structure than we're used to if we make a change as well. So it is possible to change. We saw that like it's very close at the high school, and in our other buildings it's a pretty certain, hey, we'd like to stick with iPads, we're used to that and we like it. I think it would take a really strong shift in what we want to do with our devices to change that process, because it's there's a lot already into it.
Tom.
So the big thing is the keypad for the iPads, especially in high school. Do we have a stash of those? How much do they cost, and can students take those home?
Yes, they can. So they can check out a keyboard here in the Media Center. They cost about $40 a keyboard. We use wired keyboards just so that we don't have 50 Bluetooth connections in the same area trying to find which one goes to which iPad. They've been pretty successful. We also have them in each department. Buildings got to choose, the high school and the middle school, how they wanted to push these out to classroom level. So they went with, at the middle school, grade levels and departments have bins of them. Here, departments have bins, so you can go to an English classroom and they'll have the keyboards for that day or whatnot and hand them out to kids that want them. So there are times in the hallway where you see a group of 4 or 5 students working, and 2 of them have keyboards and the others don't.
And did we purchase those, or are those part of the license?
We purchased them.
So those we can just keep?
We can keep them.
Great questions. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you back in March as we proceed through the process. Okay, excellent. So our last item for discussion, Director of Special Services Cheryl Hall is here with some special education staffing need requests.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing my request again this week. I am a little bit surprised that I'm back in front of you within such a short time, but as you know, things can quickly change in our student population and our needs. So in front of you is a request for a 0.5 FTE licensed special education resource room teacher and a 6.75 hour per day special education assistant PCA, both at Greenville Park Elementary. These positions are required to meet the needs of our students that are at Greenville Park. Part of this is due to the increased enrollment and the shift of students. As enrollment happened at the beginning of the school year, some of the students that newly enrolled into the district were the spots that were open right at Greenville Park. So during the fall, we were able to bring in students, and some of those students are on IEPs, and with our projected caseloads, we were able to have them as part of those caseloads in the fall. But now with the increased numbers of students with referrals and meeting initial criteria for special education or other move-ins into the district during the fall or during this recent, since December, we have an increase in our caseloads and the time that we need to serve our students in special education. And with that, some of those students have increased needs for help with an EA or PCA during that time. Some of those changes are students that left and came and have now come back into the district for various reasons. Those are also part of that. We have a caseload policy for our resource rooms. Part of that is a number of students that we can serve, But also what we do is look at the workload of any special education teacher, and we look at the number of students that they need to serve, the minutes of service those students receive, any other special coordination of those services. That all comes into play in that caseload evaluation and the need to increase staff at this time. You'll see that the direct cost, or the projected cost of the salary and benefits for the 0.5 teacher is $18,933, with approximately 55% of the salary reimbursed through special education, for a net cost of $8,520. The total projected cost of salary and benefits for the 6.75 hour per day EA PCA is $9,227, again with 55% approximately reimbursed of the salary, for a total net cost of $4,152. So that takes us through the end of the school year. I think Val, there was a question earlier, and Val mentioned that it's unusual to have additions at this time of the year, but it does happen. Again, it's a lesser cost at this time rather than having something happen earlier in the school year. So we try to manage that as best we can throughout the fall and throughout the school year.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Amy?
So, of course, this is very important to support these students, but I'm just wondering, number-wise, how many additional students are now needing help that weren't identified or weren't in the district before, that these two new positions would serve?
That is a good question. In the fall, we had projected that we were going to have 83 students at Greenville Park with the current FTE to support them, and we are now at nearly 100 students, about in the mid to upper 90s.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? I had a couple questions. The teacher shortage is certainly an issue we're all aware of, particularly around special education. So do you have any concerns about finding a 0.5 FTE?
I do.
Okay.
One of the surprises is that we had actually an internal person that we were going to reassign, and currently we'll still reassign for the short term, but we have a change that we know is coming within the next couple of weeks that we are going to need to respond to, that's going to significantly impact what we can do. With that, it could be difficult. We will continue to look and problem solve this and try to find the best resolution for this, but that is a concern.
Yeah, I know this is a really difficult and very challenging piece to try to stay on top of. When you talked about the district caseload policy, is that based on federal mandates, or is that something that the district has done outside or over and above that?
That's a good question. So it's actually in the state Minnesota statutes and Minnesota rule that we have the guidelines to follow. And the guidelines that are specific in the statute and the rule are specifically to setting threes. Students that are served more than 50% of their school day in a special education classroom, those have specific set caseload limits. The district is responsible to set any caseload limits for students that are in a resource room setting that are served less than 50% of their time. And so that's something that we review and look at, and was established quite a few years ago, but we looked at that about 3 years ago. When I came back into the district, we did review the caseload limits and looked at that, and also added then the workload analysis that's now required by the state.
Okay. And this obviously is per the workload analysis as well in terms of determining these positions.
It is. We look at the number of minutes that students need to be served during the day based on their IEP. We looked at the number of minutes that are available per teacher to serve those students and the ratio of the special ed teacher to the student group. We also have to take in consideration the space that's available to serve those children and have it equitable to what other children would also be served.
Wow, that's a lot. So one thing that we, as a board have certainly become aware of is, so tonight we have this as a item to discuss and move in 2 weeks on. Is there any concern on your part in terms of the 2-week window, delay that we would have in approving this?
I don't see an issue with the delay because of the situation that we're in. That I needed to bring this forward now because I know that it will be crucial to have an answer in a couple of weeks.
Okay, all right. All right, excellent, excellent. Well, thank you. Always, we know that this is important work, and we realize that you didn't envision yourself being here, but it's what we need to do for students. So, thanks, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we will move on that at our February 11th board meeting. No, you have a question.
I have a sidebar question
Yes.
for Dr. Hillman. Where is the federal government in supporting special education? There was a time when they were going to support it at 40%. Where are they?
I think we're at 8%.
We're at about 8% this now. At one time, we were closer to 18%.
So the federal government, as Noel said, in the 70s promised to hit 40%, to reimburse districts essentially for 40% of the special education costs. And they are now at about 8%. In my career, they got relatively close to 20.
Right,
at
18,
one point.
it was about 18.
Yeah, and maybe about 5 years ago or so on that. Maybe 10 years ago.
A little bit, about 8 years ago, I think.
And so now we are at 8%, which of course, we've all read about the special education cross-subsidy crisis that we have, and it isn't, the crisis is the absolute right term. So watch the legislature as well.
Yes.
And it's great to talk about things like paperwork reduction and those kinds of things. Whenever they talk about that, I get nervous because they usually end up adding paperwork, but we shall see.
We're more hopeful this year than we have been. So there's advocacy going on at both the state level and the federal level.
And this is just a good time to point out that we're very lucky to have a strong voice at the table. Cheryl is the president of the Minnesota Administrators of Special Ed, President-elect, which means she gets 2 years. So, leading her professional organization, being a voice both here in St. Paul and also in Washington. She's accompanied several MACE trips to talk with federal legislators about the problem that Noel has brought forward.
Wow, I did not realize it had dipped to 8%. That's really sobering.
It's a big dip.
Very sobering. Yes, Noel.
And I believe the other thing, when it came up some time ago, not only was it a lower percentage than they promised, but it was about 3 years late with the checks.
That piece, we've had various delays over the years in those payments. And then in addition, the pieces, while the amount of money that we're getting is going down, the mandates continue to increase. And while these are morally imperative, they are mandates nonetheless that require us to spend money. So we wholeheartedly believe in our responsibility to make sure that children with disabilities get a free and appropriate public education. We implement that every day. We've got great professionals who do that. It's becoming harder and harder because we have to spend more and more of our general fund to make that happen.
I believe our cross subsidy is up to $5 million, Val, for
like 5.6.
Yeah, which has also grown substantially. So, all right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. We'll move on this then at our February 11th board meeting. Okay, so the last item for discussion is the proposed 2020-21 school calendar. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, very briefly, we met with the Meet and Confer Committee a couple weeks back here, and Ellen Iverson and Julie Pritchard are the board members on that committee. You'll see a relatively straightforward calendar. This is the year that we will open a new elementary school. So we're very fortunate that it is also almost as late as it possibly can be for Labor Day. So that actually works in our favor that year. We'd be looking at starting school on September 7th. ending in early June. Again, following a very similar calendar pattern to what we have this year. One notable change is that this coming school year, 2019-20, we do not have a day in February for professional development as we did this year, or as we do this year. We'll be going back to that strategy in the 2021 calendar. Not a lot of moving parts in this calendar, just with the way certain key holidays and other points in the year fall. Actually, it was very good meet and confer committee, and I think we came to a resolution relatively quickly. One thing you'll notice is that we are projecting to look to the flexible learning day plan, officially in 2020-21. So that is the calendar. I don't know if Ellen or Julie, if you have anything else you'd want to share about it.
I guess one thing to point out is that you'll notice that the semesters are fairly equal, but that the quarters are not, and we had some discussion about where we in the past had been trying to balance in the quarters and whether that was as meaningful as looking at making sure the semester is balanced.
Yeah, excellent comment.
So we're not asking for approval tonight, we're just bringing it forward for you to see and then...
I think you said that school starts on September 7th, and it's actually September 8th.
Thank you for correcting that, Tom. You're right.
One more day to move things in.
That's right.
The
We
new
do that.
Greenville Park Elementary School.
I'd like to correct. September 7th is Labor Day. It's about as late as Labor Day can get.
Excellent. Okay. So that that is out there for the public to view at this point. And if there was any comments public had on this, and that's why it's great to have the present it at this board meeting and approve it at the next. So thank you. Okay. So we will move on. Next on the agenda is committee reports. That's where board members are able to comment on any work that they are doing in their liaison committees. We didn't have any of those, mostly timing of the holiday and getting started in the new semester. So we'll have those, or the end of January time period. So we'll have those going forward, I'm sure. So we can move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there was just a grant application only in the table file that was added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This evening we have just one item for individual action, which is actually a resolution, and it's around getting some support from the Minnesota State High School League grant application for work with Rally. Is there a motion to approve the resolution of school board supporting Form B application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation as presented? Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. Is there any questions or comments regarding this Minnesota State High School League grant application? Okay, so it's a resolution. We will ask for a roll call vote. Anita?
Gurwitz? Aye. Stratmore?
Aye.
Cornell?
Aye.
Brania?
Aye.
Iverson? Aye. Pritchard?
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to items for information. Speaking of school board liaison committees, I did include the updated list of committee work that board members will do in the coming year. So thank you for your service on those committees. Next, construction update. Dr. Hillman.
Yep, very briefly, construction update number 2. What you're seeing is that each month we will keep the previous report and then kind of gray that out so you can still see it, but know that that was reported at the previous meeting. And really the big thing that we have done is on January 22nd, we took about 38 people to visit McKinley Elementary in Owatonna, Rosa Parks Elementary in Mankato, Jackson Elementary in Shakopee, and East Lake Elementary in Lakeville, but it's actually District 196, Rosemont Apple Valley Egan School. We have our next Greenville Park Core Planning Committee on January 31st. That's this Thursday. Let's hope for a warm-up to make sure we can have that meeting. That will be important. And then we have actually also extended invitations for the Bridgewater Elementary Addition and Renovation Core Planning Team. Those were sent on January 23rd, and we are scheduled to have our first meeting about Bridgewater on February 7th. Once that is going, then we get the Sibley group going next. So this is footloose and fancy free in terms of really getting these things going. So thank you very much for enduring construction update number 2.
Excellent. Questions, and thanks to board members who are serving on a number of the design teams. Questions, comments board members have on construction update? I think it's brilliant that you're doing the shading to show the previous. Thank you.
I have a background in pagination, so.
I already had my file that said construction updates that I was going to file, and now it's going to be so easy to keep track. This is excellent. This is a great report, so we look forward to having this going forward as well. Okay, future meetings, as we alluded, Monday, February 11th, followed by Monday, February 25th, and then Monday, March 11th. Those are all regular school board meetings at 7 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center.
And I just want to point out that on February 11th, I will not be here at the meeting. You have supported me in pursuing my national superintendent certification, and that is that week is one of the trainings. That's a set of 4 trainings. There's one in the summer, and then there's one in the winter over a period of 2 years. And so Community Services Director Aaron Bailey will be filling in for me at that evening. And so just to let board members know, it's not that I'm out skipping around. I'm actually learning and getting some really high quality professional development from the American Association of School Administrators.
Excellent, thank you.
And I appreciate the support in getting that certification.
Absolutely. Then I believe we are only meeting the one Monday in March.
That is correct.
The one meeting in March. We have always typically not met that 4th Monday because it is over spring break. So just to, so if you have any personal plans or note to community members that we do have just one meeting in March, which is March 11th. Okay, so with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn, moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Just as a reminder before I formally adjourn, we will immediately convene for 2 closed sessions to discuss labor negotiation strategy and potential land purchase in the district office conference rooms. So we have a motion and a second on adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.